station, where unknown forces strike the edge of ecology.
This evening, Scott Forbes is a person who, for a change, is not just kind of a third party. Scott worked in the World Trade Center and was one of those present when, a few days before 9/11, some strange goings-on were occurring, which may or may not be connected to perhaps somebody, maybe, putting explosives in the towers. Well, we probably won't decide that for certain tonight, but we're going to hear why it is that some people believe that. And it's going to be very much a personal sharing, I think, from Scott. Scott's not officially presented as such before, so I hope you're going to give him lots of support, and there'll be lots of time for question and, you know, get a bit of chat going. But it's lovely that you've come here. Thank you. And basically the floor is yours, and yeah, enjoy. So please, a big hand for Scott Forbes.
Now, I hope this is going to work. Okay, this is me. First of all, let me introduce myself. I worked in the World Trade Center at the time of 9/11, and you can see all the information on here. I moved to New York in 1997. I got a job working in technology for a company based in Manhattan. I then got another job based in the Trade Center. I'm not going to mention the company name, but you can find it on the web. It's out there on the web. It's just that I still work for the same company. I've worked for them for 15 years. I hope I'm going to work a few more years. And they've asked me not to use the company name. They know that I have been vocal and on the web with my information, and they're not too happy about it. So, in respect to them, I don't use the company name. However, there are lots of hints in there about what the company is. So I started work for them in 1998, and I worked in the World Trade Center through till 9/11 2001. My visa in America was expiring in 2003, so I had to come back, and they transferred my job over here. So I work in London now, same job, and continue to work for them. As you can see at the bottom, you can see exactly what I do. I'm a senior database administrator, technical lead and team lead, and I specialise in security. The company I work for is an international investment and banking company. When I worked in New York, the New York office was the head office for the company. It was a smallish company of 700 employees globally. In the New York office we had around 400 people, and 100 of those worked in technology. Our data center was based on the 97th floor of the South Tower, and we had floors 90, 94, 5, 6 and 7. And as you can see, we had the second highest data center in the world, second after Marsh McLennan in the North Tower. Theirs was on 101. So it was a really exciting place to work, a thrilling place to work, and for me, it was like the pinnacle of my working career. You can see here, my first trip to the States on holiday was in 1990. I was visiting friends. They picked me up at the airport in Newark and drove me into Manhattan. I didn't really know the geography of New York at all. Came through the Holland Tunnel, and there was the World Trade Center. It was about 8 o'clock at night. It was just going to dusk, and they took me up onto the top of the building to see Manhattan all lit up. And I shiver when I think about it now. It was inspiring. So you can see I've said some student stuff here. That it became a magnet for me, and it became a symbol for what New York was all about. Pride, strength, ambition and money. And I loved the building. So when I got the opportunity to work in the building, I was thrilled. Loved it. Now, before I progress on, I'm not a professional speaker, and I prefer to go in the direction you like me to go in. So if you've got any questions at all, I don't want to wait till the end, just ask me any questions that you have and I'll answer as best as I can. Okay, I want to say that now so that you feel happy to ask me any questions. Okay? So, I've got a few pictures here of inside the Trade Center. This is the ground floor lobby. You can see here these are the elevators that go up the
Do
central...
you want a laser for it?
Oh, that'd be great. Yeah.
Might be useful.
So there you see some of the elevator banks that go up into the tower. On the ground floor lobby, it was 3 stories high, open space, with a balcony here as well. From the ground floor, you could take the elevator to the next lobby that you had to go to reach your floor. There were 2 primary lobbies in the tower, and the lobby I had to go to was on the 78th floor. So I would take this main elevator to the 78th floor, and then from the 78th take the second elevator to the 97th. And that's the lobby that I used to use on the 97th floor. So these are the main elevators from the ground floor, and these, inside here, there are 6 elevators going up to different floors. So I can't remember which one, but say this one, for example, would go to floors 92 to 101. This one would go from floor 78 up to 92. And you could choose which one you were going to. Now, the reason why I show you this inside the building is people know about the World Trade Center, they have images in their mind about it, and you may have some questions about it too. And this will come back to the information I'm going to give you a little bit later. I took these pictures off the web. These I took myself from the office that I worked in. So here, this was my view. I worked on the south side. There's the Statue of Liberty. That's the Verrazzano narrow straits bridge between Brooklyn and Staten Island. This is Staten Island. This is Governor's Island. This is New Jersey. So you can see the kind of view that you got outside. This is looking north, up Manhattan, and there's the North Tower. This is Tower 1. I worked in Tower 2, the South Tower. And there again, there's the North Tower looking down onto the famous Building 7 that collapsed of its own collision. We can see how, looking down it from the 97th floor, it looks quite small, although it was a huge building. So I took these photos while I worked in the office. And just to explain the office space, let me see if I can find this. There we go. This shows a map of the floor space, and I've tailored it for our floor on 97. If you look at the colourful area in the middle, that's the central core. This wall here was added by my company because this area was our data centre. And then outside here, this was all open office space. We had no closed offices, it was all open space. So here, you see a cross in the middle of the building. The red are stairways, fire exits to leave from the floor. Here you see the elevator bank. So 6 elevators coming up from the lobby. So I would use these elevators to come up, come out of this door here, walk around, and my desk was here, and this was looking south. This was looking north. That was looking west, and this was looking east. Around the floor of the Trade Center, all the way around, there was a little raised area of about a foot in width. It was enclosed in metal, and inside there was air conditioning and also heating. And you could tailor it for your locale. The building was fantastic, but it was terrible at air conditioning because of so much glass all the way around. As the sun came up in the summer particularly, the heat was unbearable. So because our space was all open, you couldn't control it. But because we worked in technology and we were geeks, what we did was we set our own fans in a circular fashion like that. So the air continued to circulate around. So the first person in the morning, which was me, used to walk around turning on every fan, and the air would circulate around the building. Those heaters dated from the late 60s, 70s. They were really old-fashioned American style hot water heaters, essentially, inside a metal grill, and you could open the metal grill, and inside there were these quite old-fashioned radiators. And I'll come back to that a little bit later. Any questions about the floor space? Each floor was different, by the way. Every company designed it according to what they needed, and in our company every floor was different as well. On our management floor it was all offices. On the floor underneath us, this side, this half of the building was a restaurant, a cafeteria. So we could go down there and eat rather than going all the way down to the ground floor. So each floor was entirely different. This was the 97th. Above us on the 98th was a company called Aon, an insurance company. And I'll mention that a little bit later too as well. Any questions at this point?
What was the width? What scale are we talking? How wide was the building?
Gosh.
Because it looks a lot bigger from your pictures.
I don't know in terms of like footage or meterage, I'm not sure. It would take you...
But about 100, over 100 metres? Kind of.
Not 100 metres, no.
Oh, okay.
I would think from end to end, probably you're looking at around 65 centimetres. Not that great a distance, really.
But pretty big.
Maybe a bit longer than that.
Okay.
The way that our offices were designed, the desks were lining around here, so if you wanted to walk around, you walked around the windows. You couldn't walk across the centre. You had to walk around the whole of the building to reach anywhere. Okay. And this is an interesting point. When we had fire drills, and I should mention this later, when we had fire drills, the drill would go, and we would all be called out into this corridor. That was it. We never went down to the ground floor. We never used the escapes. We just stayed on that floor. Because it was the 97th floor, it was very inconvenient to walk down all those flights of stairs. It would take you half an hour if you were just walking. And then you had to all come back up again. And when you think about the numbers of people involved, it was impractical to do any fire drills. So we just used to wait there. This was the main fire escape that we knew about. I never knew about those two while I was in that building. And I worked there for over 2.5 years. So they must have been marked, but we were never told about them, so we just didn't know about them. This area here were goods lifts. There were heavy-duty lifts for bringing equipment up and down. And this whole central core was strengthened. So the floor here was made, it was very solid, and it had marble slabs on top of it, as were the walls. When you got onto the outside, this floor area, it wasn't as solid. And you could do that and you could make a noise. And you could hear people upstairs as well. But the central core was very, very solid. When you went down into the stairs, it was very solid. The stairs were made of metal, but the walls were really quite hard. Okay?
How long would the lift take for you to get up to the top?
From the ground to the 78th floor lobby took less than a minute. It was very fast. You would see it going 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, like that. Very fast. The one from the 78th lobby up was like a normal elevator. And it would make lots of stops on different floors. Okay, the power down. On 9/11, we lost 87 full-time employees and 5 contractors. I think our company was the 4th company in terms of loss of numbers. Marsh McLennan lost over 600 of them. We lost a lot of people, including 20 from my department. That included my boss's boss, and people who worked around me. It was interesting. Ian Henshaw, the author, said to me a couple of years ago, we were talking and we were going to do a presentation, and he said, introduce yourself and explain that you're a 9/11 survivor. And I never thought about that. But I guess I am a survivor. Maybe I should explain. I worked on this power down the weekend before 9/11. And because I worked on that weekend, I took a day off in lieu on Tuesday night. And that's why I survived. My work day started at 7 a.m. And at that time, we worked 4 long days instead of 5 shorter days. It was to attract and retain staff in our company. So we worked between 9.5 to 10 hours on those 4 days. And my usual day off was a Friday. On that week, I asked one of my colleagues to switch. and so he switched with me. I took Tuesday off because I worked on the weekend and I wanted the Tuesday off. He was in the building on that day and he survived. Carlos had great instincts, and I'll come back to how he got out of the building. For about 3 weeks prior to 9/11, we were informed by the Port Authority of New York, New Jersey, that's what that grouping of letters means, that there was going to be a power outage for a recabling exercise. We received that notification very formally in a letter form, and essentially in technology we had to scramble. We had 3 weeks to sort this out. What were we going to do? We'd never done this before. This was an extraordinary event, and we had no plan in place for a power outage. As a bank in New York State, our systems had to be up 24/7. So we never planned for them to be down. We planned for disaster recovery, but we would be thinking of 1 or 2 or 3 systems, not everything calling at the same time. So we had to put together a strategy for shutting down all of our systems. That was shutting down our databases, our application servers, our middle tiers, the network, our external feeds. Very complicated to shut all of this down. It's not just going around and turning the button off. You have to do it in a sequence in order for it to be secure and safe. Additionally, we did have a power supply. That was a legal requirement. In case the power should go off, the generator would kick in. And it was a decision we had to take whether we should rely on that or whether we should shut everything down. And our management decided we couldn't rely on the generator because of risk. What if it didn't kick in? So we decided we would shut everything down. We had to plan to shut everything down in a documentary form and test it in little sections. And this is important, we had to validate all our backups and ensure that our DR site was ready, just in case. Our DR site was in New Jersey, a place called Carlstadt, commercial facility. It was used by many companies. Essentially it's like an airport hangar with lots of offices and lots of computer equipment. And if a company had a problem, they would call up and say, we need to invoke disaster, and they would come into the building. So on 9/12, that was full. There were many companies there and many thousands of people there. And I'll come on to that a little bit further. So, we prepared for this, and the shutdown of systems occurred at 9 a.m. on Saturday, September the 8th. It took about 3 hours for us to shut everything down, and there were about 20 people working on the shutdown, including myself. Everyone in the company was notified of the power outage, because people would come in to work at weekends, and of course if there was no power they couldn't work. We were also told, I don't know if I mentioned it here, we were told that the power outage was going to take place across the top half of the southern tower, so the top 50 floors. That's what we were told. Now I can't prove that. All I can tell you was there was no power in our part of the building. So the power, everything was shut down, and we handed it over to the Port Authority. And the next day, on Sunday, September the 9th, we began starting things up at 12, and we got things running by about 3. So the total outage period was about 30 hours. Now, without any power, the normal electronically controlled doors were open. Our security cameras were not working, so there were no tapes of security on each floor. The elevators weren't working. I saw several workmen carrying tools, toolboxes, cable reels, just standard workmen. And actually, and I say it here, it didn't seem unusual in the circumstances, and I didn't give it a second thought. I didn't pay any attention. I've been asked since, can I remember anything about them? The answer is no. I've been asked, did they look like they were from the Middle East? I can't tell you. What colour overalls? I can't tell you. All I know is that there were engineers or workmen in the building, in the lobby, public areas. Not in our private offices, but in the public areas, primarily on floor 78. By Monday the 10th, there was one supply system from Belgium, actually, which we couldn't get working. It was really frustrating, and I left people working on it at 7 p.m. that evening. In fact, it was really frustrating. My boss, Rod, took us out at lunch for a Mexican and to have a drink because we were so pissed off with this one system that we couldn't get working. And as I left the building, one of my colleagues, Bernard, said to me, "See you tomorrow, Scott, for breakfast as normal." And I said, "No, you won't. I've got the day off." And he was so jealous, he took the day off as well. Well, he survived too. And on 9/11, his was the first call I got. And he was so cool. He was seeing it on TV like everybody. He was so cool. I lifted up, said, "Hello." And he said, "Hey, Scott, what's going on?" He was so cool about it. But he ribbed me from then on about being jealous about me taking time off. I mentioned here about the days. My usual day off was Friday, but that week I took the Tuesday off. That is me. This was taken by a friend of mine who visited from the UK, and it was winter, it was freezing. And I lived in Jersey City. I lived about 4 roads back from the Hudson River. And so as the bird flies from the southern tower to my building was just over a mile. I had an unobstructed view of the towers. And I would often just have the lights off, see the lights lit up in the tower as I was watching TV. In fact, I think I can show you where I lived. Yeah. So there's the trade centre here, and that's where I lived, across the Hudson. So on the morning of 9/11, I didn't have to get up early, so I slept in. And then at about 8:30, I got up and made some coffee, and sat down, and put the TV on. And because the sun was coming from this direction into my window, my blinds were closed. It was just so bright. It was a beautiful day. And then I heard the first plane hit the Northern Tower. Now, to me, it sounded like a juggernaut hitting a bump in the road. It sounded like boom, 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 like that. So I went to the window, and it was loud enough to make me go to the window, open the blinds and look down, and there was nothing. The street was empty. And that's when I looked up. And I described it as my Spielberg moment, because when I saw the smoke, my eyes just focused straight in to it. And my first instinctive thought was, this is not right. But also, and I'm really ashamed to say this, oh fucking hell. Because I knew we were going to have go into DR mode. And to me, what was happening was spoiling the symmetry of the towers, and I loved the building. And to think about that now, it's really awful to say it, but that was my first instinctive thought. I then did something really, I'm really glad I did. I picked up the phone and I rang the first number I could think of in the office, which was my colleague who sat next to me, Mark. And he saw my number and answered it straight away and said, "What was that?" Because he'd heard it, but of course had not seen it. We sat on the south side of the South Tower, so we couldn't see anything going on in the North Tower, especially the north side. He heard it then. And I said, "I don't know, I see smoke, Mark. I really feel bad about this. Hold on." And I flicked through the channels to find something. And as I reached the channel, the news person, anchor, said, "We're going over to live shots." And they showed a picture from the north of Manhattan looking down. And I saw the hole. So from my view out my window, all I could see was smoke. But from the TV, I could see a hole.
Scott, how long after was the news feed on TV?
Probably a minute.
After the bang? 1 minute?
Really?
Probably about a minute. It was very quick. I mean, I got up, looked out the window, saw the smoke, looked at it for maybe 10, 15 seconds, picked up the phone and rang Mark. And then I put the TV onto a channel where there was news. So it was relatively quick.
Frighteningly quick.
It was very quick. And it was from a TV camera on top of a building in Manhattan looking south. So it was a fixed camera.
Mm.
And I've got a point I want to raise about the cameras in a moment.
Okay.
But it was relatively quick. Now, Carlos, who I'd swapped my day off with, sat next to Mark on the other side of the wall, and as I was speaking to Mark, he was just walking out the building. He didn't speak to anyone, he didn't pick up his bag, he just had this instinctive thought, "I'm going." And he just went to the elevator, out the building, and that was it. I didn't hear from him until 9 p.m. So it was 12 hours until I knew he was alive. Speaking to Mark, I said, I've got a really bad feeling about this. You've got to get out now, Mark. Got to go. And he says, okay, we'll go. I'm going. Put the phone down. And I rang him on redial straight away because I knew he wouldn't go. He was one of these really irritating people. He came into the office in trainers and would change into shoes. And he had like 6 pairs of shoes on. So he would be sitting there doing his shoes. He would also shuffle things around his desk. So I knew he'd be doing all of that as well. So I redialed. And he said, what? And I said, just get out now. And on that second phone call, another colleague, Brian Jones, shouted and said, is that Scott? And Mark said, yes. And he said, was that a little plane? And I think Brian must have gone to a window to see it. And I said, it looks to me like a jetliner. It looks like a big plane to me. And he said, oh Christ. And then the phone went. Mark, I didn't hear from till midnight. He got out the building. He left with another friend of ours that we worked with, another Mark. They took the elevators down. The lobby was packed. They were lucky to get into an elevator. They got to the ground floor, and as the door opened, the second plane hit our building. So glass shattered all around them. As they left, they tried to get people to leave with them, including Rod, who was a close friend as well as my boss. And he wouldn't leave because there was a group of managers who worked in the same aisle, and they were pulling paperwork and documents and CDs because they knew that we would be evacuating the building. So they were preparing for this recovery, and that's what delayed them. They were ushering other people out, but they were preparing, and so we lost all our managers. Carlos made an interesting comment. He said that when he got out of the building, he must have been one of the first out, that there were FBI people on the ground there, straight away, you know, with the jackets on. And that's, he was really surprised about that. So, this was my view looking at the Trade Centre out of my window. This is a photo I took after that first plane hit. So this is the South Tower, our tower, which has not yet been hit. This is the North Tower, which has been hit with smoke going now. This is a Citibank building in Jersey City between us. But this was my view of the scene. So this is before the second plane hit. And this is after the second plane hit. You can see the smoke here. The iconic photos you see online and in the press and so on have that big explosion. I saw the plane coming from miles away, and I'll describe that shortly. But when it hit the building, from my perspective, all I saw was the plane go into the building. I didn't see any explosion. To me, it was just there. In fact, my brain played tricks with me. I'm hanging out of my window. I'd opened the window by this point. I lived on the 15th floor. And I could see the plane coming to my right, way over the Statue of Liberty, miles away and very high, a little dot. And my brain told me that this plane was full of water and it was going to put the flames out. That's what my brain, I wasn't worried about it in the slightest. And the plane came lower and lower, and then at maybe less than a second before it hit the building, it dipped, and there was a distinct change in the engine noise. I can't repeat it, but it changed, and then it hit. And I thought it was going to go behind, and I couldn't quite believe my eyes. It just didn't seem real to me. I didn't see any explosion, I just saw the plane vanish. And you can see there, I can't see any flames, all I can see is a bit of smoke there.
How long after that struck was this picture taken?
This must be...
Seconds, minutes?
No, minutes. Minutes, yeah. And you can see the sun there behind. I'm not quite sure what comes next. Right, this is when our tower collapsed, the South Tower collapsed, approximately 50 odd minutes later. By this point I'd received so many phone calls, making sure I was alive, are you well, from here, from friends in the States. People were trying to call each other. You couldn't reach out. Some people could reach you, but my phone just wouldn't stop ringing. So I was just hanging by the window on the phone, just ring, constantly answering the phone. And when the building did collapse, again, I didn't believe what I saw. And I described it at the time to my colleagues like a sandcastle. because it just looks like sand. It doesn't look like a building that's in pieces, it's just sand. And your logic tells you something's not quite right if this is just, you know, grains of sand. It just doesn't figure. It just doesn't figure. I took this picture after our building went down, so you can see the smoke covering the whole of Lower Manhattan there, and that actually goes out into the Hudson River. And there you can see some flames now on this side of the North Tower. And then when it clears a little bit there, this is just before this tower went down. Now at this point, this is after 10 a.m. in the morning, and there's been the news about the plane hitting the Pentagon, and there's been rumours about other planes, and at one point I was hanging out of my window and a jet flew from behind me over, very high, but because I couldn't hear it until it just came out of my building, it really was terrifying and went straight over, so it would have been going east. And I've not been able to find any information about that plane at all. It was a jet, fighter jet, but I've not been able to find any information about the plane. But that put the fear of God into me. So I went downstairs thinking, oh my God, my building's going to be next. And so I didn't see the North Tower collapse. I was downstairs and didn't see it.
Did you say the North Tower went in first?
Yeah.
But it went down second?
Yeah.
Scott, which direction was the plane flying in, towards the towers from where you...
It wasn't over the towers. It was like parallel to the towers from west to east. It went over Brooklyn, Long Island.
Was it the same direction from where the airliners came from?
No, no. So if the plane hitting the South Tower was coming in this direction, the jet went that direction. Now I don't know what its manoeuvring was prior to me seeing it, but it was very fast, and it went through my mind too late.
Like
Too
an
late.
F-16 looking thing?
I don't know what plane it was, but it was a jet. It was a military jet. So the rest of that day, I remember every minute of it. Though I had hundreds of phone calls and voice messages. I remember my boss, my company had been bought by another company based in California 6 months previously, and so my boss had changed to be a boss in California, and he called me and asked me why I wasn't in the office. That stuck in my mind. And another point, I was called into a meeting, and it turns out this meeting I shouldn't have been in. It was all our top brass management, and then somebody realised I was there and asked me politely to leave, but they were discussing strategy. And anyway, it went all the way through the evening, and at 11 o'clock I received a phone call asking me if I could get into our DR site. We were starting to rebuild the company. So I went to my car, tried to leave home, but couldn't because of the security in the neighbourhood. They were stopping all traffic in all roads leaving from the vicinity. All roads were cleared, vehicles coming in, and I couldn't get out, so I couldn't leave. And I contacted another colleague, another Carlos, a different Carlos who lived nearby. He survived. He got to lobby 78 and then was met by loads of people leaving the building. He had no idea what had happened. He didn't hear the first plane hit, but he just followed the crowd and left the building, and he survived. And he lived in New Jersey but couldn't get across, and he had to walk up Manhattan, across the George Washington Bridge and all the way back down. So he didn't get home till like 3 a.m. And then I'm calling him saying we've got to go in and recover the company the next morning. So I picked him up, and we went in and began the recovery. So we began the recovery about 8 a.m. The DR site was under state police guard and security, and there was a tank outside the gates. We were able to, this is getting into work now, but we were able to recover all of our systems pretty swiftly. So we recovered 90% of our systems within 3 days, and that saved the company from going bust, essentially. But the validation of backups, recoverability and preparation for the power down is responsible for that. Had we not had the power down, we would not have been ready. Now I can't say what other companies' state of preparedness was, I can only validate what ours was.
Scott, sorry, one more question. Was it just you in New York, survivor colleague, that were doing DR recovery?
No,
or
no.
were the people in from California?
No. Eventually we had people coming from California and Florida.
Right.
And Toronto. Initially, over the first few days, there was no transport, there were no flights, and so it was just local people. People were being picked up in buses and brought into the DR site. Some people refused to come in. Some did. They wanted to be with colleagues. Some people came and couldn't do any work because they were in such a state. The majority of the technology people just got their heads down. It was the best way to deal with it. And we were in very cramped conditions because we're in like a room like this and about the same number, everyone working on the phone, on computers. It was pandemonium. And so I got into heavy garage music at that point. I would put these headsets in and listen to this music, which drove me insane, I think. I blocked out all the sound.
Can I just ask, the other companies in the top part of the building, were they all also doing much the same thing? Would they all, because of the power down, have been doing the DR recovery?
They would. I don't think any of those around us were in our sites.
Right.
There was one big company in our site. I can't remember if it was Morgan Stanley or Morgan Grenfell, one of them. But they were in the other tower corner. AM weren't in our site. And they had several floors in the So we were there for around 4 weeks until we got new offices that were leased to us in Midtown Manhattan, which we still have. What's the complex where the ice rink is?
Madison Square Garden?
No.
With the what?
With the ice rink. And the
Washington Square?
No, and the TV
Rockefeller
studio.
Centre.
NBC, pardon? Rockefeller Centre, yeah.
Oh.
Yeah, that's right. Where NBC are based. So that's where our office is now. And then I put this note in here about the post-traumatic stress. Everyone went through this, and we all went through counselling. It wasn't great, but it was something. I'm not sure if I make this point here. Now, I'll say this before we get onto this slide. People began talking about, there was a lot of discussion while we were in the recovery site over those 4 weeks, trying to figure out where individuals were, putting this jigsaw together. You know, certain individuals got a phone call from A, and A then called B, who then called C, and so we were able to put this jigsaw together of what people were doing and so on. And in some cases it was really confusing. One of my colleagues who survived, she went down the stairs all the way down and survived. And she left, her name was Sue, she left the building with this guy, and he was running faster than her because she was wearing stilettos. He was running faster, but he died. Now, the only thing we can think of is he must have left the stairwell at some point. Why? We don't know. Maybe he wanted to make a phone call to his girlfriend, I don't know, but he died. And that played on her mind forever. She didn't understand that. There were incidents like that occurred. And also people just started talking, and the people who'd worked on the power down started saying, what did we do? What was all that about? Just asking a few questions. We didn't really question it in any weighty way for several months, but it was when the information wasn't coming out about the power down, we began to question it more and more.
When you say question it, do you mean so were you thinking, hang on a minute, we've just had these attacks, were you actively thinking, was there any connection with the power down?
Not straight away. I was in recovery mode, I was exhausted, I was emotionally drained. It took several months for me personally to reach that point, to question it properly, but then I started to pull all this anecdotal information together and think, figure out. This is just an anecdote, but I'll give you these two anecdotes. One was one morning, after we'd been told about the power down, I went in one morning. I was always the first in the office before 7 a.m. And this one morning I went in, took my usual route to my desk, and as I'm walking along the window, I realised the radiator top was all dusty. Never seen dust in 2.5 years. And I did that and walked along it and left this mark in the dust. And my colleague Mark, as he came down, about 15 minutes later, said, "Did you see that mark in the dust?" I said, "Yeah, it was me." And we cleaned it. But we'd never seen dust, and we never thought about it. We didn't give it a second thought. But later you think, where did that dust come from? My boss Rod and I used to sneak up to Aon upstairs, one floor up. We weren't meant to, but we did, because they had a cafeteria that was better than ours. They used to get these fresh pastries and patisseries and stuff. So we would sneak up there, get our patisseries, and then sneak down again. On one occasion, and we heard lots of noise upstairs. And on this one occasion, Rod said, come on. So we went down this corridor in Aon, and he opened the door, and it was like a Spielberg film. We opened the door, and the open space in the office was literally blank. Cables hanging down, there was no ceiling, there was no floor, it was all barren. And it was like, what?
This was during the power down weekend?
No.
This was another
before.
occasion?
Yeah, this was
Right.
before then, like a good 2 weeks before. But it was like, what on earth? This is major refurbishing. It's an anecdote. I can't prove it, I just remember it. When you put this together and you begin to question. So, why am I concerned? Well, the power down was an extraordinary event and has never been fully explained. I have been searching for information about why did we have the power down, what was this recabling exercise, who were the contracting agency who did this work. Nobody can give me this information. The Port Authority say it did not happen. It did! Now I raise freedom of information requests constantly, just in case I manage to get a document from somewhere. I've not been able to achieve anything so far. In fact, I asked for any documents the Port Authority has for my company. That's the point I've got to, and they say there's nothing. Now, my company was a resident in the trade centre from the day it opened in 1972. And they have no documents about my company. We're paying them money on the lease. They must have something, and they say they have nothing on the company I work for.
And what about your company itself? They must have surely some record
Well,
of the orders they were given to sort their computers.
I've thought about this so much. 2001, we had Microsoft Outlook in its very first version. We also used Lotus Notes for email, and we had no tracks of any mails. And it was months later that I started to think, oh, let me look back, and I couldn't find anything. And I've trawled discreetly through all of our servers to try and find something, and I can't find anything.
And I suppose any written memos would have all gone down with it too, wouldn't they?
Because we've got all the databases.
Did we?
Recover all your databases.
We recovered everything apart from one where the backup did fail, and we had to rebuild that environment, but that was not a key.
Just the email server.
No. No, email was recovered, but there was a period that was lost. I'll tell you something that was interesting. I tried to reach, because we didn't have like broadband access as we have now. Access into the server was by dial-up, so it was slow. I couldn't dial into the server room on when this was occurring. When the first plane hit, I should recoil a little bit. When the first plane hit and before the second plane hit, we knew we were going into disaster recovery mode, and so I went into work mode. And I tried to dial into the data centre and couldn't. So I called my colleague in London, Sue, and she could. She was on the network in the office. And she could get through, and she began shutting all the servers down cleanly, so replication to our DR site would be clean. And she was shutting down until the very moment that the building collapsed. So our cable and communications up to our data centre were intact until the building collapsed.
There must be other colleagues, presumably, who did survive that know what you know is.
Yeah.
And what do they feel about it?
frankly, a couple of them have forgotten about it. It's just gone out of their memory. One of my closest colleagues, his brother died a month before, and that was more of concern to him rather than this power down. So he doesn't recollect it at all. Another colleague who no longer works for the company has independently verified it, and he's got videos on YouTube mentioning the power down, and somebody's asking him questions and he answers it, and his information is out there. I've got colleagues who work in the company now who speak to me and say, yes, I remember it and so on, but they won't go public. It's their choice.
Have there ever been a power down to your knowledge before?
No, the only similar incident was the bombing in '93, when some power went down. And at that point, the famous story then was computers were carried out of the building because there was no recoverability in those days. There was no data replication. It wasn't very sophisticated. So they literally carried computers down the stairs. But some power went down then, yes. But not in this kind of scale. The guy who has been called, and you may remember his name, the last man out of the building. Right. I spoke to him when he was in London about this, and he said that there were power downs, as a regular fact, in different parts of the building complex for certain pieces of work. So it did occur. But for us, this was the first time.
Excuse me?
Yeah.
Was there any people that didn't show up during the period just before the day that the towers got hit?
You mean employees?
Any people that you knew from a group or a team that didn't show up that day?
No, I've heard this online, like, sorry if this offends anyone, but there was a story online about no Jews came into the building that day.
Yeah.
That's not true.
Okay.
In fact, I'm going to show you some of the people that died, and several of them were Jewish. Several of them were Muslim as well. Let's see where we're going. Talk of them. Here they are. These are some of my colleagues that died. This is my boss, Rod. I'll just quickly go through them. They're listed here. So this is Ed, who was our head of technology. This is Arnold Lim, who he worked with Sue. He vanished. He ran ahead of her, but he died. This is Kathleen Burns. She was our Lotus Notes administrator. This is Gumati Kakadine. She was a project manager. This is Jason Jacobs, who was a manager. This is Brian Jones, who shouted out to me, whether it was a small plane or a large plane. This is Susan Getson-Danner, one of our managers. Rod, my boss. Tarika Manola, who was a project manager. Ken Kubas, he was head of our disaster recovery. Shimi Bigalaisen. His case has become very well known online because he called a friend of his who was a doctor and was on the phone with him for a long time, getting advice on how they could survive, and his friend was advising them on using wet towels to keep smoke from reaching them and so on. And that was recorded, and in his particular sect of the Jewish faith, it was used to validate that he died, because they never found his body. This is Matt Yarnell, who was a close friend of mine in the company. This is Sita Sunari, she works on our help desk. Lorraine Lisi, one of our managers, and Michelle Lanza, she was the personal assistant to the head of technology. And this is just a few of the people I worked with. These all worked around me. I just want to make it personal to show you that if you look there, you'll see different colours, faiths, religions. You know, it comes back to the question that you were asking. I think that's the end of it. Yeah. Any questions?
Put the lights on at the back then.
This whole idea of a power down, where all the electricity is switched off, presumably, it seems complete nonsense, because you can bypass cables. If you're replacing a piece of cable, and I've seen guys do it in the street when they're rigging lighting, you can bypass it quite easily, replace the cable and get it up. So why was a power down necessary?
I'm not an expert on that. The only answer I would give you is that the building was in the same state as when it was built in the early 70s, and some of its technologies were quite old, really. And I don't know whether its electrical systems have not been built to the point where, you know, the power could be split up into sections. I don't know. We were just told there was going to be a power outage that would affect our data centre.
When you were working, when you were shutting down your systems, obviously you went out, you had to leave the building at some point. Did you speak to anybody from other companies and ask them what was going on with them?
No. I don't recall seeing anyone from any other company, actually.
Would they normally have been working there at a weekend, or would most people go home? Did people work through the weekends?
Yeah, some people worked at weekends, so if you went in at a weekend, you would see other people. You wouldn't necessarily talk to them, but you'd see them. And sometimes the viewing tower was on our tap, and occasionally when they had special lifts for the tourists to go straight up to the top, and sometimes they were being maintained or weren't working, so they would be brought up to our lobby and then filed into other lifts. So you'd see these tourists on our lobby occasionally as well. I can't remember seeing other company employees there at all.
Can I just ask you a question? Just based on a construction theory, have you ever seen a controlled explosion where they bring a building down?
I've seen it on TV.
Well, they come down, don't they?
Yeah.
Have you ever seen something that comes down in an earthquake, falls outwards, doesn't fall down? So that sort of explains the theory of explosions in the base of the building. Because you've just indicated that the strength in the building was in the middle.
Mm.
So why didn't the outside fall out and the centre remain?
Yeah. That, to me, seems very logical.
Yeah.
Rodriguez, his story is, I don't know if you've heard about this, he witnessed the explosions in the basement.
Well, I actually seen it on TV, and there was a lady running away from the trade centre and said there's more explosions.
Right, and actually, and you can check this online, Ed McNally, one of our bosses, in his obituary in the New York Times, his wife, who was speaking to him for a long period, he said there were explosions going on.
Yeah, it showed on the TV, a lady was running away, and she was actually going towards the camera, and she said she kept turning around and said there's more explosions now. If that was the case, what actually exploded?
What? There is, endless testimony of people saying before the towers came down, there were explosions in the towers. And as you say, I mean, what's interesting about the William Rodriguez case is that he experienced the first explosion, for anybody that doesn't know this, 30 seconds before the first plane came in. Before. Right down in the basement.
Now, and just to say about the basement, there were 4 or 5 floors underneath ground level that we used for administration. So when you went to get your security badge renewed, you had to go down into the basement area, like 3 floors down, for a photograph to be checked for your security and so on. There were all these administrative offices down there, and that's where he was based. And then underneath that there were these parking bays. And those parking bays weren't used much after the bomb in '93. It used to be public parking and then it stopped. It was only used for deliveries. And I think his testimony was that he went down to where there were soft drinks being delivered, and that's where the explosion occurred.
Well, he was with his staff, sitting in whatever room, having a cup of tea, and they heard the explosion. Now, as I understand it, that was in a floor below them, maybe in this kind of garage area. One of their colleagues came up, opened the door, and literally he was bloodied, and his clothes had been literally blown off him. And he was just saying, explosion, 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 in a state of shock. And obviously they'd heard it. And Rodriguez is certainly of the opinion that, in his view, there may even have been a truck bomb, as well as anything else that then happened later on, because it was in that place where, as you say, in '93, they set off the charges down there in the truck.
Right. Well, this comes back to the bigger picture for me. I don't think the information we have about 9/11 is complete or honest. I don't have a theory, but it's not full, it's not complete. We don't have all the information to hand. And I'll give you a couple of pieces of personal information to exemplify that. when we were in the DR environment, there were thousands of survivors from the towers there. What a great opportunity for everyone to be talked to be interviewed, to be interrogated, to be asked. I was called twice by Scotland Yard. First time to check I was alive, because they must have a record that I lived in the States. And the second time to debrief me. They wanted to ask me if I'd seen anything suspicious, had I seen anything unusual. They were asking the questions that should be asked. But my colleagues in the American systems weren't asked that. Now that just seems to me to be completely inept. They should be looking for this truthful information. Why not? That's what concerns me. I know about the power down because I've worked on it, and that's why for me it's something I'm interested in. But there are other pieces, all these little pieces that other people know about that add up to a bigger picture.
Scott, that begs the question to me of why is Scotland Yard taking an interest? What take a view on that?
I don't know, no idea. Well, and there's another interesting part to this. The first call I received was from like your PC pod, just saying, "Are you John Scott Forbes? You arrived in the US on the 1st of August 1997. Yes. Are you well? Are you injured? No. Fine, great. We'll contact you tomorrow for a longer interview." It was as simple as that. And then the second one, when they called me back and it was in the office, it got more detailed. It wasn't the same guy, but it was more detailed. Did you see anything unusual? Were you in the building at the time? What did you see? And I had very little information at that point for them. But after that second phone call, one of my company's directors came to see me and said, "In future, if police agencies contact you, we want a lawyer present." And that really annoyed me.
I mean, it may be standard procedure. It may be if British citizens been involved in a crime scene, even though it's a different country. But it is a good question to ask, yeah. And was there ever any comeback from that? You filed your telephone report and that was the end of it?
That was the end of it.
Very interesting.
So they might have been frightened that you had seen something suspicious.
I don't know. I read or heard something that the call went out from government here to the police, Metropolitan Police, to search out all British citizens who worked in the World Trade Center and check on them. That's what I heard that somewhere. I can't remember where. So I don't know where that came from.
I mean, can I ask you something quite personal? Because I mean, obviously you go onto the internet and your testimony is attacked very much by the sceptics. I personally find it very fascinating to hear you speak it because, to me, it sounds totally authentic, but you are attacked as a liar and a fantasist. I mean, how do you feel about that? What's your feeling when you read this stuff from the
It's
sceptics?
rare, it's very rare now that I get any email. It was usually by email. It's very rare now. In the first couple of years after 9/11, I got a lot of email, and it was split 50-50. Some were saying, "Oh, you're a patriot for bringing out this information," and that really upset me because I'm not a patriot.
You're just a human being.
I'm not American, I'm not a patriot, and I don't like patriots. Don't brand me as a patriot. And then on the other hand, you don't exist. I called your company, they say you don't work there. And they just, how do you fight that? You can't fight it. And if you go on to, in fact there's a guy on YouTube who, he made a video saying that my information was lies, basically. And I started this personal argument with him on YouTube by text, by emails on YouTube. And in the end I thought, right, you're just never going to win this. It's not worth it. Just don't go down that route.
What it appears to me, all you're doing is stating the fact.
Yeah. But I don't have any proof.
No, but what I'm saying, you're stating the fact. The shutdown did happen. You were there on specific days, you weren't there when the planes hit it. So what is there to contest?
Yeah.
He's of a mind upset that my information is not valid.
I think part of the problem is that your information has been used widely by the truth community. I think rightly, in terms of it's a very important sort of part of a wider picture. And so therefore I think there's an assumption probably made that you are kind of fighting for the truth movement, and therefore by questioning the official story of 9/11, you are attacking all that is good and right about American citizenship and all of this. I think that's the problem. Because, of course,
Yeah,
anything that questions that official story is very offensive to some people,
Yeah.
especially in America.
And even some of my fellow employees have been very offended by it. And I've got to respect that. If they feel that way, I've got to respect it because I work with them.
I understand that, but like you're saying, there's a power down. They can't contest that because they were there. They know it. What I've seen today doesn't strengthen or, you know, if you're sitting here listening to it, all I'm listening to is the story of a man that was there.
Right. And in a way, an avenue like this, of me being able to give my testimony is really great for me because I'm able to get it out there to you guys. I didn't mention it and I meant to. I approached the 9/11 Commission through their website, by email and by phone to try and get the information looked at, and it was not even acknowledged. I couldn't get anywhere with it. And William Rodriguez's testimony was held in secret and was never used, never published. Which, you know, surely a commission which is trying to analyse what happened should pull all threads of the truth for the greater truth.
I mean, I think that whilst I think your neutral position is quite correct for the person in your position, it does say more than maybe meets the eye because, of course, you know, one of the main contentions is there were explosives in the building. I mean, the vast majority of 9/11 truth people believe that. But obviously the big question from that is, so when and how did those explosives get in there? Now, your testimony suggests there was at least a 30-hour window where maybe, and that's all you can say, maybe unexplained activity went on. Now, the workmen you saw may well have been normal workmen. And the ones that you didn't see were the ones up to more nefarious stuff. I mean, I should also mention Richard Gage, and if you've not looked at his video, go on to Architects and Engineers for 9/11 Truth. I mean, his presentation about the physics of the collapse of the towers is exemplary. And he argues that there was lift shaft maintenance work in the months running up to 9/11, where he thinks at least some of the charges could well have been placed there because they would have had access to exactly the kind of places he believes you would need to get to lay charges. So maybe whatever, possibly, was going on in that final weekend was the final wiring up, who the hell knows. But just the fact at all that it's denied tells you something interesting. Because it's obviously, as you say, it's something you would think they just want to get to the bottom of. But the fact that they...
Well, the easiest thing would be to just bring out the contract. Show me the contract for the company that did this work. Easy. And I would be happy with that because that would satisfy my curiosity. That would be the easiest thing. Why is there nothing? Why is it all been white blank?
Because it's fishy.
Well, because it's easy that way, of course. Yeah, cool.
Scott, I want to ask, what prompted you to go public with your testimony and the I suppose conspiracy theories have been going on for 9 years, and this is great, but it's a very small number of people. What do you think, in your personal opinion, would form a critical mass to convince the skeptics? How would that be done so it doesn't become another JFK thing going on for 40 plus years?
You can't answer that question. The smoking gun would be a real strong piece of evidence in some regard.
Do you think the nanothermite thing, as Stephen Jones?
I think that's great evidence.
Yeah.
I think that's great. The professor from Copenhagen who's done his analysis. That's great evidence, and he's a great orator and presenter of it too. That is fantastic evidence for the power down. I need proof in some documentary paper form that the power down existed. And I think if I was able to get something I could hold on to, I'd be satisfied. And I think then, I went to a presentation in the House of Commons with Ian Henshaw, and that question was asked, have you got any evidence? And I had to say, no. And at that point, everyone turned off. It was like another flake. That's exactly the attitude I had. All I need is a piece of paper, so I'm no longer a flake. And at that point, people will take the information seriously, and it can be taken further. It is a long time. It's 10, 11 years now, and you know,
But
the
it-
long-
but
the-
But if
the
they
fir-
had the paper, it would just be a power down.
well, the longer it goes on, the less likely it is, I think, that I'll get that.
Yeah, I'm sure.
But to me, it feels so close now. There's so much. There's 1,000 architects and engineers. There's so many documentaries. You know, Loose Change was one of the first, but there's so many more now.
But there's a lot.
So
there's a lot
close.
More,
What would?
there's a lot more as well, actually.
Yeah. What would tip
no,
it?
Well, I tell you what would tip it.
So elusive.
And the reason
George Bush coming clean.
Inner sanctum.
No, seriously.
This is completely off the point of the power down, actually, and it's more about corporations and corporate liability. That's what will tip it. The reason why my company don't like me using their name is because there is still corporate liability outstanding against us.
Still.
Former families of former employees that were killed still fighting, and that action could be a killer. Could be a killer, not just for our company, but for all those companies that are involved. I mentioned how we've not had fire drills. That's it. That's it. Now I can't mention that, but that would be horrendous in a corporate sense. I pointed this out when we went to Rockefeller Center. When we moved into Rockefeller Center, we didn't have fire drills. And they have a nuclear bunker in Rockefeller Center. And because I mentioned it, they then instituted fire drills, proper fire drills, straight away like that. And frankly, I think that's why I'm still employed. I think they're too frightened to let me go. Honestly, I really believe that. They don't like me speaking out, but they keep hold of me because they can control me a little bit. They just phone me now and then and say, we don't like you doing this so much. You know, they can control me.
Let me ask you something else, because just to take you back, when you said you were watching the plane coming across, the second plane to get the tower. Now obviously it's not a very, what some would say fringe theories, other people hold them very dear. There's the whole hologram theory. Now you watched the plane. I just want to ask you, did it just feel utterly normal, a completely normal plane?
Yeah.
You got, no feelings that it was anything other than what it appeared to
No
be?
doubt. The only thing was that the plane, when it did dip, and it was like the engine revved up. It went from third to first gear. That's what it was like. It just like literally. It just,
Was it turning as it did, or just coming straight?
As it sort of.
So it sort of corrected, there's that bit we see.
It's like it was making a final manoeuvre so it would hit the centre of the building.
Do you know much about the actual people that were supposedly flying the planes? Because I watched a program on it, and they said that these people, supposedly terrorists, were actually had flying lessons. Now had flying lessons. Now there's no way I can fly a jumbo jet or a 747, and they said that there is no way that the time they'd spent learning how to fly, that they'd be actually to bank a plane like that and put it smack on the centre of it.
Twice. It wasn't just one plane.
No,
Well,
it's two.
we can go further than that, because the alleged pilot of Flight 77, which hit the Pentagon, was a man called allegedly Hani Hanjour. Now, the flight school that inadvertently trained him actually went on record saying he was one of the worst pilots they've ever had. He could barely handle that little Cessna. And if you look up pilots for 9/11 Truth, he managed to execute one of the most extraordinary feat of aviation acrobatics to turn it. It dropped less than 2 minutes. It dropped 7,000 feet or thereabouts at 500 miles per hour, turning this perfect curve to hit the one part of the Pentagon that was under renovation at the time by a man who, as you rightly say, they said was just like, this guy was terrible. So nothing makes sense. And that's the problem. And then when you put it together with testimony of people like Scott, it's like you've got to put the many, many pieces together, because the official story does not make sense. What the answer is, as you're saying, that's the problem. To draw an absolute conclusion is difficult, but you can absolutely say the official story is a pack of lies, or simply does not address or denies the existence of things that you would have thought.
The trouble is, like, we're talking here about 9/11, and about how close to the truth is. We just sort of now that can refute that somebody landed on the moon. That happened in the 70s.
Well,
And this is actual proof that no man landed on the moon. And yet, you're saying that this could have been done by the American people. I'm not saying you say this, but this is the theory. Well,
That's what you mean by the American people. A small criminal cabal with intelligence links in America. You can go beyond that wherever you want to
the
go.
trouble is you've also got the theory that the American people were brainwashed into thinking that they're the nation. And so they're not going to question something like that, because to question it, they've got to look for answers. Look for answers, they might get the truth, and I don't think they want the truth.
Well, and yet you say that, I mean the 9/11 truth movement is very, very strong in America. It took longer there to get going than it did outside of it, but now it's up and running. Well, the polls say it all.
Yeah.
I mean, I think in America it was something like when they took the polls, about 40% of Americans just do not believe the official story. That's a huge amount.
And those people who are questioning it, they're very strongly worded about it. You know, they have radio stations running that for it. You know, they're not holding back on it at all. It's all very underground. It's not mainstream at all.
But I mean, like what you're finding is basically there are people that maybe might say more if they weren't going to fear ridicule or fear attack for being unpatriotic. That's the problem. If everybody just stepped out of that, I think you'd hear a lot more. And it may happen. I mean, you know, come back to your point earlier on, that tipping point. Well, when you get to 50% or thereabouts, the world doubting something, you're near that tipping point. It needs a whistleblower or just something to break, like you're saying, from maybe some weird corporate suit, or you know, you don't know where some little vital thing might break. Or, yeah, sure, it might turn like into a JFK type thing, where nobody really believes the official story, but there's the vagueness, and I think that's what they're banking on. I think they're hoping enough time will go by. Marcus?
Yeah, perhaps at the meeting next weekend at the Marriott Hotel at Chantilly in Virginia, if enough people can hear what's going on, they might find out a few things, like what's going to happen to the euro, for instance. It's the Bilderberg annual meeting next weekend. It starts Friday.
Did you get an invite?
Yeah, keep asking.
You mentioned you were going to come back to the point about the camera angle.
Oh yeah, and I can't explain that, and it's really intrigued me. Have you been to New York?
Yeah.
If you've been to New York, you turn on the TV, you look at the news channels. At the end of every news program, they have a camera on a building looking out into New York Bay, or looking across Brooklyn at the sunrise or the sunset over New Jersey. They've got all these public cameras all over the place, and there were famous cameras on top of the World Trade Center that were used constantly by all the TV channels.
Yeah.
So when a boat came into the harbour, you got your camera looking down it. When sunrise and sunset, the camera would turn on the news and you would see it. Now, 9/11, the building, the camera, nothing. Why didn't anybody access those cameras? I don't understand this.
That's like,
Or weren't they working?
well, it's like 7/7, isn't it?
Yeah.
All the cameras suddenly failed.
Yeah, as they always do.
Yeah.
Except the one that came online a minute after the first building had been struck. And that was what intrigued me. I mean, I don't work in TV, but I don't really think there's any reasonable way of explaining that.
I think it was the CNN.
Are you sure it was?
No.
Because the way in which these kind of news agencies work, you have Jane Stanley, was it, reporting from the BBC, and CNN doing likewise. The building 7 collapsed 40 minutes before it actually did. And I think they were taking the feed from Associated Press. Or
The reason why I say CNN was
Yeah.
because that image was from where the CNN building was, uptown, midtown,
Right.
looking down, and that was the camera angle on
That
top
was
of
from
their
their building.
I'm assuming that was the famous one they used to use from their building,
Yeah.
looking down at the World Trade Center, and they just went onto it. That's why it was quick, because
Yeah.
it was there. It was probably live 24 hours a day. They just had to switch it on.
I understood, and I can't corroborate this, but do your own research on it, as they say, that it was a Carlton television camera that was first on the scene. And there's quite a famous politician who was a director of Carlton TV at the time, who has camera nearly in his name.
I've heard that. I don't know if it's true. I don't know if it's true or not. I might have it.
Camera on.
I mean, I just, because it's not every day we have somebody that kind of was there and part of it, I just want to ask you two things. So after all this happened, I mean, so now you're very aware of the truth movement and all of that. How long, in your personal experience, was it before people started questioning who really carried out the attacks? When did that filter through to you and your kind of colleagues? You know, at what point did you become conscious that people were questioning the official story?
Not with my colleagues, we would discuss it very low-key, discreet way. Not in terms of like a truth movement or anything, but we just talk about it. And we did say, what did we do over the weekend? What did we do? And it almost like in a guilty way. The bigger picture took quite a long time down the line. It didn't become serious for me until I came back to the UK in 2003. So that was a good 20 months later.
And why did it suddenly become serious?
I think because it just became clearer, being away from the environment. By that point in the States, I'd become very disenchanted because of the war with Iraq and all of that, and the reaction of the public there. And for like the first 2 days after 9/11, there was, in New York City especially, there was a lot of reflection, which was kind of reassuring, and then it suddenly kicked into this patriotism, USA, honk your horn, USA, all of that. And I remember driving back from the DR site to home, and there was a candlelight vigil by the river, and there were tens of thousands of people there with all their flags and everything. And it really kind of upset me that it had been turned from this tragedy into this other kind of event. So I was very disenchanted with all of that response. The haste with which the site was cleared as well really upset me and a lot of people. Yeah. There was no need for it.
Well, and more than that, there was no forensic investigation as such.
There was no need other than to clear the site. The site could have remained exactly as it would, and actually it would have been an appropriate epitaph for it to be left as it was.
But wasn't that the same thing at the end of the day with when you said that Scotland Yard and Wrangle, are you all right? Have you seen anything? And none of the American citizens who worked there were ever asked, and the rubble of the World Trade Center that was meant to be forensic evidence was cleared away, shipped to China as quickly as possible. Doesn't that all fit into that thing?
It does suggest it, yeah. But if it is forensic, and you are carrying out a full and honest analysis, you wouldn't be, would you?
No.
You can turn the argument on its head.
Do you know anything about two guys, Larry Silverstein and Frank Lowery, who were supposed to have bought the Twin Towers shortly before it fell?
Silverstein owned the towers. He bought them. And he made an insurance claim thereafter, and I think he won.
He did, yes.
So he made quite a lot of money.
Because he's also bought the Westfields at the Olympic site.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
That's not
There is a he's insured the lives of people, like gambling on the stock exchange. So everybody's lives insured, even yours and mine. So the more lives that get taken, the more money he reaps.
If you hear the phrase "pull it, run,"
Andy, can I make a quick point just on that?
Of course.
Because I don't know whether I made this connection for myself, but maybe the people have done likewise. You know, there is a special Olympic bell that's been struck this year for the games. You know that there's an inscription on it. So there is an inscription on the bell, which is a speech from The Tempest. The connection is that the speech, ironically, The Tempest, I never read it, but I looked into it, and The Tempest is effectively the story, or it begins at least with the captain of the boat deliberately running the boat aground on an island in order to, carry out whatever plan he had. He didn't let the rest of the crew know this, but he did it, and then he finally admitted that he'd done it. And the speech, which is on the bell, says something along the lines of, ignore kind of proles or the people, for this isle is full of noise. As in, carry on regardless, we'll get in some heat. But that particular speech is where Aldous Huxley got his inspiration for naming Brave New World, which I thought was a bit spooky.
Well, put together with all the other occult symbols all around the Olympic Stadium. I think we all know about those now, don't we? But,
Yeah.
Oh, that is very interesting. And also, have you noticed how much Shakespeare is being fed to us from every direction? Almost to the point that it's going to make a whole generation sick of it, I would have thought. But just make you wonder if there's some psyops weird thing going on.
What occult symbols?
You don't know?
No.
Very briefly, you know the famous eye over the pyramid?
Yeah.
Which is on the dollar bill, and it's a very Masonic symbol. The mascots look like a single eye over a sort of pyramidal body, and the lighting gantries are the perfect, what I call the Eye of Providence, all the way around the stadium. You've got like perfect Eye of Providence lighting gantries, which some say is an in-joke, others think it's very sinister and tells you who's really in charge.
Plus the logo, which...
Oh, so, well, and there's a logo which, if
Yeah.
you rearrange it, spells Zion.
Yeah.
Make of that what you will.
If you can get hold of first class Paralympic stamps, there's only a few issues. It's got a lot of symbology in that logo. And it's got the lightning strike for danger powers in it, and somebody said there's 666 in it, and there's the barcode, I don't know what it means. It's worth looking at the stamp.
The 666 barcode connection, it doesn't work, funnily enough. I know it's a classic conspiracy thing, you can disprove that. But anyway, that's another story.
It's 666, but it's not fully formed 666. It's actually included in abbreviations for the beast. And it's in the Paralympic stamp, and there's only a few issues. It's an old stamp you've got to hold of.
Down for that one. I just want to ask you one thing before, because we're going to have to close in a second. This is a bit esoteric, but going back before this happened, days, weeks, did you or any of your colleagues have even the slightest intimation, even a funny feeling, anything that maybe something weird was going to happen? Because we do hear there are people that did get weird feelings before and didn't show up for work or whatever. So no, absolutely not the slightest tinge of anything being odd.
No, because of it, because of the events, you can remember everything around it. So I can remember everything we did on that Monday. So you remember everything in absolute detail because it was frozen. But I don't think you should twist that in any way. It's just that's the way your brain works. I can remember, that we went out to lunch. So we had frozen margaritas, and we went to the ATM, and my boss took out. This is how ridiculous it gets to the point. His wife pinned me to the wall weeks after he died to ask me why he pulled out $500 from the ATM on the Monday before the Tuesday. I don't know. I was with him when he did it, and I have no idea why he did it. Those are the things that you remember.
Well, listen, I mean, I don't know about everyone here, I found it very powerful today. What is powerful to me about it, I mean, obviously we're a bunch of conspiracy theorists, but you're not. You're a man that just happened to be there as part of it, and yet what you have to say and share, I think is very important, whatever people make of it. I admire the way you shared it so honestly and in a very real way, and I hope that your quest to at least get the acknowledgement of the power down, if nothing else, may one day come your way. And, I suppose the only thing we can say here is I think that's something a few of the truthers maybe might want to pursue. The more people that gently just try to get one piece of paper that acknowledges that happened, maybe the rest a little bit easier. But, certainly I found it very powerful, and, say Scott's not a public speaker in general, but I'm sure you'll agree that was a very authentic and powerful evening. So I'd like to thank you very much, and I'd like you all to give a massive round of applause.
station, where unknown forces strike the edge of ecology.